In the dead of night, an inferno tears through a farmhouse, taking the lives of 5 precious children. And when their parents come outside, they find that their kids are nowhere to be seen. How could this happen? What really went down that night? Today we're going to take a look at one of the most mysterious cases ever. This is the Sodder family. It was 1945 and World War II had been raging across the globe for 6 long years. On December 1944, Allied troops were moving into Germany, but Adolf Hitler was determined to hold out until the bitter end. Meanwhile, George and Jenny Sodder were just trying to make it through another day on their small dairy farm in West Virginia. They had 5 young kids, all boys. There was 7-year-old Maurice, then 6-year-old Sylvester, 5-year-old Harold, 4-year-old Louis, and 2-year-old little Cyril. They were a happy family, and all that mattered was that they had each other. But in early December, something strange started happening. Jenny began having vivid dreams about her house burning to the ground. She told her husband about these dreams, and he did his best to reassure her that nothing bad would ever happen. But deep down, he too couldn't help but worry. Every night she had the same dream. So Jenny decided to write down exactly what she saw and what happened. She didn't want to be too much of a worrywart, but she couldn't shake the feeling that these dreams were trying to tell her something. Then on Christmas Eve 1945, the family woke up to some very concerning news. A local newspaper reported that there had been a fire on Christmas Day in Somersville, which was only 3 miles away from where they lived. In the fire, a family of 6 lost their lives. Their home had been completely destroyed and there was no warning before the blaze erupted. It was like the house just burst into flames out of nowhere. Was this some kind of bad omen? Jenny and George didn't think so, but they couldn't help but wonder if it would be a good idea to go over the house with a fine-tooth comb, just in case. They checked all of the electrical wiring and made sure every single light fixture was in perfect working order. They looked at the gas lines and saw no potential hazards. They inspected the chimneys and flues and even checked the old wood stove just to make sure everything seemed fine. So they shrugged off those nagging worries and enjoyed the Christmas holiday the best they could. But then, on December, Jenny had a weird dream yet again. She saw her own farmhouse bursting into flames and she could hear her children screaming for help. She woke up immediately and told George, who was fast asleep beside her, "I just had another dream. Our house is going to burn down." Of course, he just laughed at her and told her to go back to sleep. But Jenny couldn't get back to sleep. She was way too worried. Instead, she got out of bed and went downstairs to sit by the wood stove. Just then, she heard the faint sound of a truck driving down the road. She went to the window to see what was going on and she could just barely make out the shapes of 2 men walking along the road. The next thing she knew, both of those men were standing on her porch. She opened the door and they told her that they needed some help. They explained that their truck had broken down and they were looking for someone who could lend them a hand. Jenny felt sorry for them, so she invited them in. She offered them some food and drinks, and then they asked if they could use her phone. That's when she noticed that one of the men had a pistol tucked into his belt. Now, she wasn't alarmed or anything because back in those days people carried guns everywhere. It was just the way things were. After finishing their coffee, the 2 men said thanks for everything and said that they'd be on their way. As soon as they stepped outside though, Jenny's 2 older boys, Maurice and Sylvester, ran to the door and asked their mother, who were those men? She told them, just some strangers, that's all. But after they left, she told her husband, George, "I don't like the look of those men. I think we should keep an eye on them." But he just replied, "Don't be silly. What makes you think they're any trouble?" And so they all just went back to doing what they were doing. A few minutes later, the family smelled something burning, but it was nothing at all. So they just ignored it and went on with their day. At around 10 p.m. that night, Jenny went upstairs to check on her kids. She was half expecting to find them playing, but they were all fast asleep. She kissed them all goodnight and headed back downstairs. Just then, she heard a loud bang. She wasn't sure what it was, but it sounded like it had come from the direction of the 2 men who had stopped by earlier. Jenny told her husband, "I'm not liking this. We should get the kids and come. Take a look." But he said, "No, you stay here with the kids while I go and check it out." He grabbed his shotgun and walked out the door. About 10 minutes later, he came back inside and told Jenny, "It's all clear. Those guys must have moved on. It was probably just some fireworks or something." Jenny nodded slowly, but she still couldn't shake that uneasy feeling she'd had since the men arrived. Then suddenly, she heard what sounded like screams in the distance. She told her husband, "We should go and take a look." But he said, "No, you stay here with the kids. I'll go check it out." And he walked out the front door. This time, Jenny could hear what sounded like shouting. It was definitely not fireworks. Just then, she noticed that the front door had swung open, and she could feel the heat rising from the floor. She ran to the window and screamed, "George, come back here right now. The house is on fire." She struggled to get the window open, but the smoke was too thick. She could barely breathe. All she could do was run to the back of the house and try to get out that way. When she finally got outside, she saw that the entire roof had collapsed and the whole place was engulfed in flames. She was screaming for George and the kids, but no one could hear her. She stood there watching helplessly as the farmhouse burned to the ground. Finally, the fire trucks arrived and put the blaze out. But by that time, it was too late. The house was completely destroyed. And then something very strange happened. When the firefighters searched through the rubble, they found the bodies of George and Jenny, but they could find no trace of the 5 children. Where were they? Had they managed to escape the blaze? But if they did, why didn't anyone see them? Or had they died in the fire? If so, why were their bodies never found? Even the bedrooms were completely untouched by the fire. Their beds were totally fine, but their bodies were nowhere to be seen. Sometime later, investigators found the charred remains of the truck that the 2 suspicious men had been driving, but they could find no connection between them and the fire. Where those men had come from and why they had stopped at the Sodder farmhouse was a total mystery. To this very day, the case of the Sodder children remains unsolved. For a long time, it was assumed that the children had perished in the fire along with their parents. However, a few weeks after the tragedy, a woman in Pennsylvania claimed that she had seen one of the Sodder boys in a department store and out. Since then, there have been hundreds of possible sightings of the missing children all over the country, but none of them could ever be confirmed. There are 2 prevailing theories as to what happened to the children. Some believe that they were kidnapped by those 2 men who had stopped at the farmhouse, but why they let George and Jenny die is anyone's guess. Others believe that the children were taken by a secretive government organization. Some even say that the kids managed to escape the fire and are still out there somewhere, living under false identities. What do you think happened to the Sodder family? Let me know your theories in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.